That night, the house seemed to breathe in unison with the old dog at her feet. Mila sat in the dark kitchen, one hand around a cooling mug of tea, the other resting on the gray head of Rex, who sighed in his sleep. On the table lay a warning letter from the housing committee, stamped in red. Keeping dogs in this building is prohibited. Next to it lay another paper, much older and more powerful, with a different seal, the one that named her, officially, as the owner of a small registered shelter. In the apartment above, footsteps moved back and forth, and the sharp voice of her new neighbor rang out on the phone. "She'll have to get rid of that mutt. I'll make sure of it." Mila looked at Rex, then at the papers, and for the first time since the complaints began, she allowed herself a small, cold smile. The rules her neighbor loved so much were about to turn, just not the way that woman expected. Hello, dear friends. I'm Laura Bennett, and this is a new story about revenge and justice. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional life stories. Before the letters, inspections, and slammed doors, Mila's life was quiet and carefully arranged. She was 65, a retired nurse, and lived on the ground floor of an old brick building at the edge of the city. Her two-room apartment was small but warm. Lace curtains, a faded but soft sofa, wooden shelves with books, and framed photos. The kitchen was the heart of the home. Mornings started with the hiss of the kettle, the smell of strong black tea with a slice of lemon, and the warm scent of bread warming in the oven. On the windowsill stood pots with basil and mint. When she opened the window, the smell of herbs mixed with the damp scent of the yard after rain. At her feet, wherever she went, patted Rex. Rex was 12 now, a big mixed-breed dog with a graying muzzle and gentle eyes. Years ago, Mila had taken him in from a nearby shelter where she volunteered on weekends. He had arrived skinny and shaking, terrified of sudden movements. Slowly, with patience and boiled chicken, he had learned that not every raised hand meant pain. Now he followed her from room to room, content just to lie where she was. The neighbors knew them. Children in the courtyard would run up to scratch Rex behind the ears. Older residents smiled when they saw Mila walking him in the early evenings, her scarf tied tightly against the wind. Mila's life had not been easy. She had lost her husband many years ago, her only son lived abroad, and her pension was modest. But she had her routines, her books, her dog, and the shelter work that gave her a sense of purpose. The small organization she helped was officially registered. On paper, Mila was one of its co-founders and reserve foster carers, allowed to keep animals temporarily in her home by agreement with the shelter. For a long time, this was just a formality. She usually hosted no more than one animal at a time, Rex, and sometimes a sick or abandoned dog between operations. She always warned the neighbors, kept the stairwell clean, and made sure no dog barked at night. Then, one spring, the apartment above hers was sold. The first time Mila saw the new neighbor, she was carrying a bag of potatoes up the stairs. A tall woman in her 40s almost ran into her, perfume sharp, heels clicking. "Oh, sorry," Mila said, stepping aside. The woman looked her up and down quickly. "You live here?" "Yes, first floor. I'm Mila, and this is Rex." The dog wagged his tail politely. The woman wrinkled her nose. "You keep a big dog in an apartment?" Mila smiled. "He's old and very quiet. You won't hear him." "We'll see," the woman said, already turning away. "I'm Olga, third floor." Her tone was cool, clipped, the voice of someone used to having things just so. For a few weeks, there were no problems. Olga went to work early, came home late, talked loudly on her phone on the stairs. Sometimes she glared at Rex when they met, but said nothing. The first sign of trouble came as a piece of paper on the notice board. "Dear residents," it read, "remember that keeping large dogs in apartments is dangerous and unsanitary. Please think of the comfort and safety of your neighbors." No names were mentioned, but Mila felt her stomach tighten. She tore off the note, sighed, and hoped it would end there. It didn't. The complaints began quietly and then grew. One afternoon, Mila was called to the office of the building manager. "Maria Ivanovna," he said, using her full name in that heavy way that meant trouble, "we've received several anonymous complaints about a large dog on the first floor. Barking, smell, danger to children." Mila blinked. "Rex doesn't bark. He's old, and I always clean up after him." The manager shrugged. "I know. I've seen him. But rules are rules. Officially, our building regulations say animals must not disturb other residents. And some people are very sensitive." "Have they named me?" she asked. He avoided her eyes. "Let's just say the new tenant upstairs is persistent. She says she's allergic." She says the dog sniffs under her door, that she's afraid to walk on the stairs. She even sent a letter to the housing committee. Mila's hands tightened on her back. Allergic to a dog on a different floor? He sighed. Look, I'm just warning you. Maybe keep the dog outside more, or consider other options. I don't want trouble for you. Other options? As if Rex were an old chair. Days later, Olga stopped Mila in the stairwell. Your dog scared my friend yesterday, she said sharply. He was standing in the hall. He was lying by my door, Mila corrected gently. He can't climb stairs anymore. It doesn't matter, Olga snapped. My guests saw him. They were uncomfortable. This is not a kennel. It's a residential building. It's also my home, Mila replied. Rex is registered, vaccinated, and very calm. He has never bitten anyone. Olga crossed her arms. You can't live with a big dog here. I've spoken to people. I know the rules. The rules say. I don't care what you think they say. Olga interrupted. Either you get rid of that dog, or I will make sure the authorities do it for you. The words hit like a slap. Soon after, inspections started. First, someone from the housing committee came to check complaints. He walked through the apartment, sniffed, wrote something in a notebook. Your dog is big, he said. Some people think large breeds shouldn't be in apartments. He's old, Mila said. He sleeps most of the day. The children play with him. He shrugged. Talk to your neighbors. Try to avoid conflict. But conflict kept coming. One day, a loud argument erupted in the courtyard when Olga confronted Mila in front of other residents. You're selfish, Olga shouted, pointing at Rex. You keep this animal in a tiny flat just because you're lonely. Think about others. I'm allergic, my guests are afraid. The stairwell smells like dog. Several neighbors shuffled awkwardly. Some looked at the ground. Others frowned at Olga's tone, but no one spoke. Mila felt heat rise to her face. Rex is my family, she said quietly. He has nowhere else to go. Take him back to the shelter. Olga snapped. That's what they're for, not our building. If you won't, I'll go higher. I have contacts. That evening, another letter arrived, this time more official, with stamps and references to regulations. It cited complaints and potential violation of sanitary norms and suggested that keeping large animals in the building may be prohibited. Mila sat at the kitchen table, the letter shaking in her hands. Rex lay by her feet, sensing her distress, pushing his head into her lap. For the first time, she imagined the shelter cages again. The cold concrete floors, the endless barking, the fear in dogs' eyes when volunteers walked past without stopping. No, she thought, stroking Rex's head. I will not send you back to that. But the pressure grew. Olga boasted loudly that soon this place will be free of that mutt. She told people she'd spoken to a friend in the sanitary service who agreed with her. She talked as if Mila had already lost. One rainy afternoon, Mila returned from the shop to find a note stuck to her door in neat, sharp handwriting. People like you belong outside the city with their dogs. Not here. The cruelty of it made her chest ache. She spent that night in tears, feeling small and tired. For the first time, she wondered if she had been selfish, if keeping Rex with her was unfair to everyone else. Then, around midnight, she opened the drawer of the cupboard where she kept shelter papers, adoption forms, vet certificates, the founding documents of the organization. And there, among the folders, she saw something she had not thought about for a long time. The registration certificate that named her official role. She wiped her eyes, picked it up, and read. Founder and head of the charitable organization Second Chance Shelter, Maria Ivanovna Sokolova. Her name, her title, a half-forgotten conversation from years ago surfaced in her memory. The lawyer explaining that, for tax reasons and legal protection, the building where she lived had been registered as one of the shelter's foster homes, a temporary branch of the organization for rehabilitation of animals. Back then, she had just nodded and signed, not imagining it would ever matter. Now, it looked very much like it might. Slowly, her breathing calmed. If Olga wanted to play by the rules, Mila thought, then they would play by all the rules. The next day, instead of avoiding conflict, Mila went looking for information. She called her friend Irina, the shelter's director, and asked her to come over. They sat at the kitchen table with tea and cheese sandwiches while Rex snored at their feet. Mila laid out the letters and the shelter documents. Irina read carefully, her brow furrowing. So she's using no dog's rules against you, Irina said. But this building is on the registration list as one of our foster locations. The authorities agreed to that years ago. Can they force me to remove Rex? Mila asked. Irina shook her head. Legally, the rules are different for registered shelters and their official foster homes. There are conditions, of course, vaccination, hygiene, no disturbance to neighbors. But you meet them. If anyone tries to use regulations, we can show these papers. Mila felt a small spark of hope. So, I have rights. You have more than rights, Irina said with a smile. You have responsibilities and protection. That woman upstairs has been counting on you being alone and afraid. You're not alone. They formed a plan. First, Irina would send an official letter from the shelter to the housing committee, reminding them that the building was registered as part of the organization's foster network and that Mila was acting as an authorized carer. The letter would emphasize that Rex was old, vaccinated, and under regular veterinary supervision, and that there had been no objective violations. Second, Mila would document her own behavior, walking Rex on a leash, cleaning up after him, keeping the stairwell clean. She'd ask friendly neighbors for short written statements saying they had no problem with the dog. Third, and this was Irina's idea, they would invite the very same sanitary inspector who'd come before, but this time through official channels, as part of a scheduled shelter inspection. That way, any assessment would be recorded properly, not just as a vague complaint. And about Olga? Mila asked. Irina smiled, but there was something sharp in it. If she really wants to involve authorities, she said, we can also remind them of her obligations. Noise, late-night parties, cigarette butts thrown from windows. You're not the only one who can file complaints. Mila hesitated. I don't want to ruin her life. You're not, Irina said gently. You're reminding her that rules work both ways. She wants a building with strict enforcement? Let's give her one. Mila nodded slowly. The plan felt just, not cruel. She was not attacking first. She was defending what mattered to her, and to the old dog whose head now rested trustingly on her knee. That night, she slept better. For the first time in weeks, she dreamed not of cages and closed doors, but of open fields and Rex running, younger and faster, through tall grass. Things started quietly. A week later, Olga encountered a notice on the building's information board, scheduled inspection of registered shelter foster home on ground floor. Representatives of the organization and sanitary service will attend. What shelter? Olga exclaimed aloud. What are they talking about? People in the stairwell glanced at Mila, who just smiled politely and carried her shopping upstairs. The day of the inspection, Irina arrived with a vet and a neat folder. A municipal inspector came as well, the same man who had visited before, but this time in an official capacity. Olga hovered in the hall, pretending to check her mailbox, clearly hoping to witness Mila's humiliation. Instead, she heard the inspector saying things like, clean, no smell, dog is calm, vaccination records in order. Irina showed him the registration, the shelter's legal status, the list of foster homes, Mila's name as authorized carer. From our side, the inspector said at last, there are no violations. If neighbors have personal dislikes, that's another matter. But there is nothing unsanitary here. Mila almost cried with relief. 2 days later, the housing committee sent a very different kind of letter than before. It stated that, taking into account the shelter's official status and the inspector's report, they found no grounds to force Mila to remove her dog, as long as she continued to follow basic rules. Olga was furious. She stormed down to Mila's door, waving her phone. You tricked them, she shouted. You turned your flat into a kennel on paper. I'll go higher than this. I'll complain to everyone. Mila opened the door just enough to look at her calmly. You wanted the rules to be followed, she said softly. Now they are. You old witch, Olga hissed. You can't live here with a shelter. This is a respectable building. A building that allows registered charity work, Mila corrected. By the way, I've spoken to the police about cigarette butts falling past my windows at night, and about loud music after 11. They suggested I start logging dates and times. Perhaps we will all learn the rules together. For once, Olga had no quick answer. Word spread. Neighbors who had been hesitant to speak up now felt braver. One on the second floor mentioned being woken by Olga's late-night phone calls. Another complained about her parking across the sidewalk. The old lady from the top floor quietly told Mila, if you need a witness, I'll sign anything. Mila did not unleash a storm of complaints. She didn't need to. She filed only a few, carefully documented ones, enough to show a pattern. The result came faster than expected. Olga received her own letters, warnings about noise, about littering, about improper parking. A fine for smoking in the stairwell followed. Her face grew tighter each time she checked the mailbox. Then came the final twist. The building manager called a meeting to discuss the behavior of certain residents. Mila attended, sitting quietly in the back. Olga arrived too, ready to complain again about the dog problem. But when the manager began, he said, "We've had several issues in this building. Noise complaints, litter, attempts to pressure other residents. We must remember this as a community. We also have an officially registered shelter foster home here, which has passed all inspections. That is something we should be proud of, not attack." He glanced pointedly at Olga. "Those who filed false or exaggerated complaints will find that their own actions are being reviewed just as carefully." A murmur went through the room. Olga opened her mouth, then closed it. She suddenly looked smaller, less like a queen and more like someone realizing the game had changed. After the meeting, no more letters came from Mila. Rex continued sleeping by the door, snoring softly, unaware that his home had almost been taken from him and then fiercely defended. Olga, meanwhile, began closing her own door a bit more quietly, playing music at a lower volume, and, most striking of all, avoiding Mila's eyes in the stairwell. The woman who had once promised to get rid of that mutt now stayed very far away from him. The following months settled into a new kind of peace. Mila kept to her routines: tea in the morning, walks with Rex, afternoons at the shelter when her joints allowed it. Occasionally, she'd bring home a recovering dog for a few days, careful not to overwhelm the quiet old animal who considered this his territory. The building knew now, this was not random chaos, but the work of a registered organization. Some neighbors even started helping. The young man from the second floor sometimes offered to carry dog food bags. A little girl from the third floor came down to read to Rex, her small hand buried in his fur. Olga changed too, though she would never admit it. She stopped leaving nasty notes. She no longer told guests loud stories about that crazy dog lady downstairs. Once, when she came back from work and found Mila struggling with shopping bags, she even held the entrance door open in silence. They were not friends, but the open hostility had drained away, replaced by a wary truce. One rainy day, as they both waited for the elevator repairs to finish, Olga spoke without looking at Mila. "Your dog," she said, hesitating over the word. "He doesn't bark at night. I thought he would. He's quieter than some people." Mila smiled gently. "He's old. He has nothing to prove." Olga gave a short, tired laugh. "Maybe that's why I was jealous." She didn't apologize, not in so many words. But she didn't need to. The important things were already clear. Years later, when Rex was gone and another elderly dog had taken his place on the kitchen rug, Mila often thought about how close she had come to giving in. One neighbor's sharp tone, a few official-looking letters, and her own loneliness had almost convinced her that she had no right to share her home with the animal who had been her family for so long. But in the end, her revenge had not been about making Olga suffer. It had been about standing up, quietly but firmly, for those who had no voice of their own. About using the very system that was turned against her to show that kindness and responsibility had more weight than fear and noise. Olga eventually moved out, chasing a new job in a shinier district. Mila heard, through gossip, that her strictness with rules did not always help her in places where she no longer controlled the narrative. Mila stayed. The building remained a little bit kinder, a little bit more patient with animals, and with old women walking them slowly on cold mornings. The shelter continued its work, and the certificate on the wall, with Mila's name, reminded her every day. She was not a burden. She was part of something bigger. Evil, the kind that says, "People like you don't belong here," had curled back on itself, leaving behind a lesson carved into the life of the building. Sometimes justice is not loud. It's simply the moment when the person you tried to push out becomes the one whose name is on the door. Thank you for listening. Do you think she went too far, or did she simply take back her justice? Share your thoughts in the comments.